might be thinking to yourself, I don't look like a fish. How the heck did a fish evolve into something that eventually looked like me, right? Well, there were many steps along the way, and it took a very long time. One of the first steps that had to occur was that fish needed to evolve from having fins that allowed them to swim underwater to having fins that were shaped a little bit more like forelimbs, like legs that allowed them to pull themselves up into a shallow environment on land. The very first fish to be able to do this was Tiktaalik. Tiktaalik is also referred to as a fishapod because it is a fish. Tiktaalik is a fish, but it was the very first fish to start to evolve into or have similar features to a tetrapod, the four-limbed creatures. Right? So Tiktaalik's forelimbs revealed the beginnings of fingers, right? Rather than the bones creating the typical fin, they started to look a little bit more like fingers with wrist bones and elbows and shoulder bones, right? These upper arms allowed it to pull itself up onto land. Now, other features characteristic of land mammals was its ability, the nostrils moved to the top of its nose to start breathing air. It had a distinct neck so that rather than just being stuck swimming like a fish, it was able to look up and down rather than just side to side. It had a robust sequence of ribs to help it prop its body up on land. It had sharp teeth, kind of like a crocodile, right? So it's still a fish, but starting to share a lot of features with land-dwelling animals, or the eventual land-dwelling animals that would evolve from it. Okay. So why did all of this evolve, right? Remember, evolution is fueled by an adaptation to an environment, right? So it's not that Tiktaalik just really wanted to move onto land. That's the Lamarckian idea of evolution that has since been disproven. Instead, these adaptations were simply to improve its survival odds, right? The fish that were able to swim better in shallow water and were able to maybe move out of a drying up shallow water environment and migrate to another environment that was a little deeper before it dried out. That allowed it to live, succeed, reproduce, pass these genes on to its offspring, and that's what allowed Tiktaalik to evolve. Right. So Tiktaalik, again, was a fish. However, it gave rise to tetrapods. Tetrapods are four-limbed animals. It required tens of millions of generations of fishes to eventually evolve into animals that could live on land. So this was definitely not an overnight. It wasn't even just a couple years. It was tens of millions of generations for this to happen. Right? Eventually, tetrapods evolved. The earliest tetrapods were amphibians. And even though they were able to live on land and they had four legs, they were still tied to the water. This is because they had to lay their eggs in the water, right? And these eggs eventually hatched, formed into tadpoles, which were organisms that had to live in the water, still had gills, before eventually transforming into a land-dwelling amphibian.